1-2-1-2 with your boy Abdul-Salaam, a.k.a. Brother Jabril. The show is Exposure. That's Saturday, March 22nd in Houston, Texas at Bald Kitty, featuring two legends of the game, Jason Hilbert and DJ Tony Powell, who are also my special guests for the evening. Welcome to the show, Tony Powell and Jason Hilbert.
Glad to be here.
Good to see you guys.
Yeah. So two legends in the game. I will say that here's how it starts for me is when it was probably in the early 90s. I saw an outline for an award show put on by a company called Houston Scene Magazine. And that's the first place I ever saw Tony Powell's name. And so what year was that, Tony?
That was Club AV8. It had to be maybe 98, maybe, possibly 98.
Yeah, that sounds.
Oh, that
right.
was a later one.
That was Edwin Dean and Charles.
Yeah. Shout out Edwin Dean and Charles, two legends in the game as well.
Wherever you are.
Wherever you are.
I know where Charles is. I don't know where Edwin is.
Wherever
anymore.
Edwin is, yeah.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, he'll just kind of pop up, Edwin Dean.
Yeah.
So what was your, let's talk to you, Jason. What was your first nightclub gig in Houston, Texas? First
club gig. Wow. There was actually a few that kind of happened right around the same time for me. I want to say the first one that I really remember was the Lizard Lounge when it was on Richmond down by somewhere around Chimney Rock in Hillcroft area.
Yep, I remember that.
So I did that, and then funny story about that, I also played at a big club used to be at the Tower Theater. It was called Decadence.
Yeah.
So I would play, 10 to 2 at Decadence, and I would get in my car and I would hightail it over to the Lizard Lounge, and I would get there and I'd drop my car off in valet. I'd have the bouncers grab my crates, and I would get in there and, I would start at probably about close to 2:30. And that's when everybody was filtering in, because in those days, Houston didn't have liquor jurisdiction like they have now. So if you served liquor, you had to shut at 2:00. You couldn't stay open. So Those clubs the regular early clubs would close at 2:00, and then you would have these after hours places like the Lizard Lounge that would be open from like 2 until, sunrise normally.
What time would you play till?
Usually about 6. Yeah. I usually didn't go much after that because, you have to consider those people that were coming in, the majority of them had been drinking all night. So they were really only good for maybe like an hour and a half, 2 hours. You had other people that,
well, there were other
maybe
things
weren't drinking, but I'm not gonna incriminate myself. But
of course,
those were the ones that would stay up late. You know what I mean? So so it was usually about 6:00, and as a general rule, they didn't really stay open much later than that because that's when you start getting a little sketchy, and
of course,
it's just not good for business.
How about you, Tony? What was the first club you played at in Houston? What was that called?
The very first club I played at was actually it was weird. It was called Catch One, of Catch One fame from the club in LA.
Right.
The owner of that club was dating a lady here who also owned clubs, and they decided to open Catch One here. They also opened a hamburger place on the corner, Mom's Big Burger.
Oh.
So That was my very first club in Houston, and it was strictly by mistake. The DJ that came down with her, Billy Long, he really didn't like Houston that much, and he was longing to get back to LA. And one night he just quit. And my roommate at the time knew Miss Jewel, and he grabbed me by the arm and drugged me over to Jewel. He was like, "This is my roommate Tony. He's the best DJ in the world." Blah 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 blah. She didn't want to hear that. She was like, "Can you get me through the weekend? You know, and then we'll talk later." And so that's how it started. You know, unfortunately, for the club, for her, for myself, for all parties concerned, it was at the very beginnings of the AIDS crisis.
Right.
So now we're talking 81, 82. And
Was
so
Catch One a straight club, or was it a mixed club?
Catch
Or
One was Catch One in LA was always a gay club.
mm-hmm.
And when Catch One opened here, it was a little strange because it was right next to another club that was a popular straight club. So sometimes the straight crowd would find their way in there because it was a big club. It was a little glitzy, and so they would find their way in there. Some stayed, some were repulsed by the whole thing.
What year was
But
that?
it was great. It was right there on MLK and OST. I mean,
Right.
good grief. I mean, we were in the hood,
Yeah, I
you
mean
know. So,
that nowadays
it was what it was,
yeah.
but it was we had the second largest dance floor in the state of Texas next to Gillies.
Wow.
And
That main room held about 2,000 people.
Wow.
Tony,
What you got, Jason?
Yes.
was this lady that you speak of really a lady?
She was really a lady.
Okay. All
now,
right.
she liked ladies also, but
Gotcha.
she was a lady.
Okay.
Yeah.
Say no more.
Yeah.
What year was this, Tony, at Catch One?
This would have been 1981, I think, is when it opened. If I'm not mistaken, was 81. And so by 81, 82, it closed, I want to say 83, maybe early 84, because her club in LA was just being ravaged by this virus. And I think she felt like I can't save both.
Yeah.
And since the club in LA had been open forever, she went back to LA and she basically saved that club, that community.
Right.
And when Catch One closed here, there were a couple other clubs, but everything was in Montrose,
right?
Back then.
Yeah.
So I think my next club after that may have been the Midnight Sun.
Midnight Sun. Jason, what year was Lizard Lounge and Decadence for you? Because I remember actually hearing those clubs advertised on the radio.
So that was roughly about 1990 or so. I was at the end of high school. I was in my senior year. Right. So Decadence had two incarnations. So originally, the first time it was open was in 88, 89, right around the same time that you had clubs like 6400 and Excess. Yeah. They did a big radio broadcast. They had a Saturday night on the radio, Sunday night. They did a trash disco night, I believe, and that was on the radio also. And then it shut down, and then it reopened the second time, and that's when I worked there. So that would have been about 90. Lizard Lounge went back a little bit further. They were already about 3 years in before I came in, and then I worked there until they eventually closed it because the original owner left and went to Dallas and started the Lizard Lounge there. Mm-hmm. So he had focused all of his time in Dallas. So, Houston was just kind of there to run out the lease. So
I have a funny story about the Lizard Lounge.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
I didn't have a car at that time. and the Lizard Lounge would be our last stop because we could stay there till the bus started running in the morning.
Oh, it
So I
was
was probably one of those people, you know, who
That's
was that
around
when it
hilarious.
was
5:30, huh?
was that when it was on Richmond or when it was still by the Galleria? Because they had
When it was on
two
Richmond.
locations. Okay,
I
okay.
went to
Yeah.
that one on Richmond. It was it a sunken dance floor or was there just like a
Yeah,
railing around it?
yeah.
Yeah, it
There
was kind of sunken thing going on.
a
Yeah.
Yeah.
couple of steps down. It was kind of shallow though.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
used to dance there, man. I used to dance with a bunch of b-boys like early back in those days. It was so much fun. I would skip school. I mean, just to go stay up all night and dance during the week.
Man.
I love that place, man. I think Edwin Dean took it over too. Speaking of which, I think
Yeah,
the Hula
they did
Hut,
something there. Gotham, that's what it
Gotham.
was.
That's what it was called. Yeah,
Yep.
Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
They
I
used to have a
remember.
lot of fashion shows there and stuff. As a matter of fact, the night that I think you was it an awards night? Were they giving away awards or something? The night that you were there with, because Edwin Dean actually had the Houston Scene Awards
Oh yeah,
there.
Yeah. So I know
And,
that the last Houston Scene Awards that I remembered going to was it was either that year or maybe the following year, but it was in the same building that 6400 was in originally, and then it was renamed and rebranded. I think it was called like
mhm.
I can't remember the name, but it looked like or it was really strange. It looked like a Paula Abdul video. Like the decor they had like it was very like animated and
yep.
it was a big, big place. And yeah, that was an award show that I remember they had there and I
Was
think
that Blue
Michael
Planet?
DeGrace
No.
no, Blue Planet was on the other side of Richmond and
Richmond.
it was much smaller though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Those days, I didn't really understand what house music was. I was telling somebody this the other day. I don't think I ever really heard the term house music until I really started getting into the dance scene. And there was these guys who had moved to Houston who were originally from Houston but had gone to like one guy had gone to the Navy and he lived in New Jersey and there was a big house music scene in New York and New Jersey. And so when he came back he was doing these loft moves and everybody's like, "What is this?" And then there was this tape that was going around of like dancers doing these moves from Brooklyn, and so it became like a thing to call everything house. I mean, even things like remember Amber? I don't really recall what you would call Amber or like kind of some of the stuff that kind of fit between freestyle and house music. You remember that
Oh, it was
period?
yeah, it was a lot poppier and kind
Yeah,
of
it was real
very
bubblegum.
it was real Euro sounding. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But I would go out to those types of things just to kind of hear the music, and I fell in love with it. But it was it was not really house music to me. I didn't really understand it as house music. When would you say, um, Tony? When would you say that like house music really became more than just club music and became its own thing? Well, about what time and what era would you say that it was for you?
I would say it would have to be somewhere between 90, 95, someplace in there, because nobody really knew it was or called it house music. It really depended on where you were from. But people in Houston, all they knew was it was great dance music to dance to. And you have to bear in mind, I was playing on and on in like 19, I want to say 82, late
Right.
82 at Catch One. And I was playing a lot of those songs, but I was able to use it with a lot of, the Hashim and the different craft worky type of,
Right.
European style house, and the kids were eating it up, and it wasn't until I think probably a good 95 when the kids sort of knew who it was. simply because they knew who the artists were. And I think that was part of the problem too. But once I had gotten my Billboard reportership, I was bringing all kind of artists in. I was bringing, you know, Colonel Abrams, Joe Monda, and you know, lots of the underground house artists that they never heard of, but they heard the club, the music in the club. And I think it was making that connection that sort of put the house on that trajectory here in Houston.
What
Because
about
a
for
lot of
you?
people didn't know what it was. I was playing Alexander Robotnik.
Right. I remember
I
you
was
talking about
playing
that.
Italian, German imports like crazy.
Yeah.
And they were eating it up.
Yeah, and
And
that's where it started, those records.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
What do you think about for you, Jason? When would you say it really kind of snapped as like a genre itself beyond just being club music?
Well, it's so
I know
funny.
that you've been back and forth between New York a bunch. I don't know if that was during the beginning stages of your DJ career or was it something that happened later?
That was a little later. So funny story about the question you're asking. And Tony, I don't know if you're going to remember this at all or not, but like when you and I first met, like around probably 1990, do you remember we did this night at Homage? Do you remember that?
City? Okay.
So for people that may have gone out a little bit later, Homage, after it shut down, it became another nightclub. It was called Red Square. It was on the corner of Louisiana and I want to say Webster. So if you know where the Randalls is in Midtown, it's the big red brick building opposite Louisiana on that corner. And it was a massive 2-4 nightclub. And now there's probably like 8 or 10 businesses in there. I think there's like a tanning salon and a pizza restaurant. But in those days, you know, it was a big club. So that's where that was. So going back to the question about, you know, that when I feel like house music crossed over, we had that meeting at the end of the night. And the record that was like really starting to get a buzz was Gypsy Woman. And I think Tony mentioned that he had played it a couple of times that night. And, you know, he was like, yeah, this is it. You know, MTV's on it. This is what's going to, you know, kind of catapult this sound into the mainstream. And that was definitely like a good jump off point for, you know, a lot of those records that finally got some traction. Because in the straight clubs prior to that, the DJs were playing a lot of really old music. They were playing a lot of 80s music. And it wasn't until about 1991, 92 that there was finally a new breed of DJs that started playing in the clubs. And they weren't, you know, they weren't really playing the retro stuff anymore because that wasn't their thing. So now you had new records that were starting to come in. I mean, there were, you know, some good examples that I think everybody's really familiar with, or is like the Mark Kinchin, what was it, the Nightcrawlers, Push the Feeling On. That was a big one. All of the Liberty City records did really well in Houston at that time. What else? Oh, help me out, God, that was so long ago.
Some Love
you
It,
know,
some
Crystal
Merc stuff.
Waters, and then there was also some things that, you know, other things that were coming out of Miami, like The Fog, which was, who was that, like Oscar G and Ralph
Oscar G,
Falcone. Those were the guys that did the Liberty City project.
Yep. Merc.
You know, and then we were also starting to see now other record stores popping up, other than, I won't mention any names, but the one that used to be on Shepherd that used to sell records for $300. And if you were there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But she will be unnamed.
Okay.
So these other stores were coming in and they were starting to buy new records, whether it was house, whether it was breaks, you know, and that's when like the whole rave thing started to bubble up a little bit.
I wanted to ask you guys, because you had kind of touched on something about new DJs coming into the scene. I want to talk a little bit about the barriers for entry back then, because I know that there was a lot of, well, especially like back in the 80s, there was a lot of segregation happening with the club scene. Um, so what were the big barriers for you, Tony, to break into as a DJ in the city? What were the challenges that you ended up
I
facing?
don't know. I had a lot of barriers. I was black, I was gay, I wasn't from here, I was a Yankee. So I had a lot of barriers, but um sometime fate takes care of that.
Yeah.
Because I remember a lot of nights when I would try to get into heaven, if I had maybe a couple friends with me, they want two IDs. If your heel on your shoe was too high, you couldn't come in. If you had on a baseball cap, you couldn't come in. But if you had on a cowboy hat, you could come in. So it was sort of obvious what was happening. And something strange really happened. Scooter Bearden, who was Houston Scene Magazine used to give out the Scooter Bearden Award.
Right.
Scooter Bearden taught me how to edit video.
Mm-hmm.
And we were friends outside of the club pretty much, even though we were like maybe 4 or 5 blocks apart. I would only see him like maybe once a month, once every couple of months. Well, as fate would have it, when he became really ill and could not, perform at the club anymore, he called me. He said, "Can you come over? I want to talk to you about something." Sure. I go over. He was like, "Tony, listen." He said, "I need you to take over my Saturday night until I'm well enough to come back to work." I said, "It squeezed me." I said, but I I said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Do you think, that would be okay?" He was like, "It's whatever I say."
Wow.
I said, "Okay." He said, I don't know anybody else that can do video as well as you." I said, "Okay, fine. No problem." The very first night I was there, I literally had to convince the guy at the door, "I am your DJ tonight."
Wow.
I said, "That's why I have all these crates of records." And it was the craziest thing. And I'm not saying Charles Armstrong was racist.
Right.
I'm not saying that. It could have been a business decision on his part that, look, I feel like if too much of this is mixed in, it's going to ruin the soup. I
Right.
don't know what his thought was, but everything trickles down from the top. It doesn't start at the front door. It starts at the top.
Yeah.
And I did Saturday night at Heaven until he passed away. And then my boss over at Studio 13, he was like, "You got to come back to work."
Right.
Sean Byrne, you remember Sean Byrne? He
Yep.
was a DJ back then as well. He took over my Saturday night. I think he worked at one of those. It was a music store, sold speakers and stuff and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so that was sort of my envoy, I guess you could say, into that portion of it. And I think once people heard me play, because that's always part of the battle.
Yeah.
Once they heard me play and I wasn't playing, rap or anything, whatever consumption that they could come up with to keep me
Yeah.
out the door, everything was fine.
Right.
As a matter of fact, John Hanley,
Oh
who,
wow. I haven't heard that name in forever.
when Boy Bar opened, he picked me to work Boy Bar. Fantastic.
Yeah.
I loved it. Matter of fact, I think me, Mike Snow, and DJ Biz, we did what used to be the old Alabama Theater. We did that a couple of times. So
Right.
it it kind of opened the door a little bit once people sort of knew what I did
Right.
musically, as
Yeah.
opposed to, yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Jason? What was the main barrier for you? I know you started really young. Was there any major barriers for you to get into
Yeah.
the club
That
scene?
was that was the biggest issue, was me being young, because when I
I
started,
mean, shit, you look young right now, dude.
I
Yeah,
know.
You look
no
14.
shit.
I'm 52. But anyhow, when I started out, I was really, really young. So at that time, all of the DJs that were working, it was basically a rotation of the same like 5, 6, 7 DJs, and they were all older guys, like in their 30s and 40s, and they had a very bad gatekeeping mentality. They were DJs who were career DJs at the time. They didn't have another job, so it was like if someone was going to bump them out, then they were out of work and they weren't going to pay their bills. So it worked out really well for me because when I was coming up, I was playing everything, and I was playing a lot of hip hop actually. So that really worked in my favor because what would happen was club owners would go to like Mike Snow and they would say, you know, we're going to open this new club. We want you to play this, that, and the other thing, and we want you to play hip hop. Oh no, I don't play hip hop. Mike,
We all know Mike. Mike will not
yeah,
Yeah.
play hip hop.
he might play a Beastie Boys record and
Yeah.
Freaks of the Industry, and that was it. That was his hip hop.
Freaks of the industry. That's it.
Yeah, yeah, man. So there was a couple of times that he would call me up and he was like, "Hey, this new place is opening up. They want hip hop." I was like, "Cool, that's my thing. You know, I can do it. You know." And when I would get those gigs, it was attracting a younger crowd. So the younger crowd didn't want to hear a flock of seagulls and you know whatever he was playing at the time. So it worked out in my favor. So then, you know, it just all kind of snowballed for me. Funny story though, when I first met Tony, he was working at Studio 13. Was, you know, it was all black, all gay. And remember, Tony, I would show up at your
Yeah.
booth every Thursday
Yeah.
night.
You're like a
And
little
they
white
would,
dot.
they would, man, and I looked crazy. I had hair down to my shoulders. And they, you know, the door people, they would just wave me in because they knew that I was there to see Tony. And, you know, I was just like, I was mesmerized because he was playing all the music that I loved personally that I couldn't hear anywhere else. And he was playing all the new music because, you know, he was getting all the records from his reportership. So he was playing records like months early. And I was just like, man, this is great. And then just all the fierceness with the dancing, and man, they were like cats. And I was like, I'm all about this.
Yeah.
And I went to heaven a couple of times, but that just was not my bag at all.
Right.
So yeah, that wasn't my thing. So I gravitated towards Tony and what he did.
So Incognito was a blast. We
It was
used to
fun.
have parties there at the Orbit Room for Splash. And I
Yeah.
think that's what drew the attention of the guys that actually opened it up as Incognito, is that they've been there several times for Splash. And they was like, this is a great location, because the Orbit Room was a fantastic location. It was literally away from pretty much everything.
Yeah.
And you could play music as loud as you want. The whole building was cinder block.
Yeah. I think there
That's
was one
crazy.
person that lived right behind y'all, and you can't hear anything when you leave that club. It's so solid. It was, yeah. If you guys have never been to Incognito or know the Axiom, it's at the corner of McKinney
In Live
and
Oak.
Live Oak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I used to go to punk shows there when it was Cabaret
The
Voltaire
Axiom. Oh,
3.
yeah.
Yeah.
You were
Yeah.
you were older school. Like I went to the Axiom. That was the first punk rock show I ever went to. Was at the Axiom.
Yeah, I was young. I was like 12, 13 maybe.
Yeah. Same.
Were you guys in any DJ pools here?
I was.
And you know, that's where I got a lot of my music from, was the pool. I didn't get my reportership until probably like 90 or something like that. And prior to then, I was getting all of my music basically from the pool. And there were two pools. There was the Texas Black DJs Association that was run by Gary Ewell, who was from Washington, D.C. So he had that D.C., New York influence, and he was bringing stuff here, but all the DJs couldn't play it. So if he only got his hands on 10 copies, he was like, well, I know Tony Powell can
You
probably
would get
play
it.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was really a upside because whatever we didn't have to buy, that was fantastic. And plus we were getting a lot of stuff first. And what was it? Dance, Texas. I was in Dance,
Yeah,
Texas.
Sam Myers. That's the one I
Sam
was.
Myers, yeah. Was in his pool.
Yep.
Did you
So
report?
I
Were
think
you
that's what
reporting?
kept us current,
Yeah.
kept us ahead of the pack.
Jason, were you reporting as a Billboard reporter as well?
I didn't become a reporter until '98, and then I did it until 2 years ago when they finally shut the chart down.
Oh wow, what was all involved with that, Tony?
Oh man, I have to tell you this story. And this was the old Studio 13 when the DJ booth, they made a closet out of the DJ booth. And it was inside the club up against the wall. It was about maybe 4 feet by maybe 6 feet.
You were in the
Um,
closet.
it was a closet that they took and they hollowed it out and put a
Oh my god.
window and it was the DJ booth. Um, but later on, I moved the DJ booth and it was much bigger and it was nicer. But
Nice.
I was playing one night and one of the kids came up to me and they was like, Tony, the cops are here. And I was like, what cops? And he was like, they undercover. And I was like, why would you say that? He said, they're all white. And he said, it's a lady and two guys. And I was like, well, I said, do you have dope on you or something? He said, no. I said, well, go ahead, get out there on the floor and dance. Don't worry about it. And eventually, the tallest of the three came over to me. And I used to keep a chart in my DJ booth so people could grab my chart. They could take it to the record store and buy it or look for it or whatever. And he was looking at my chart and I was playing Alexander Robotnik. He was like, oh, you play imports here? I said, yeah, I do. I play a lot of imports. And he was like, oh, okay. All I remember him saying is, would you be interested in Billboard magazine or something like that? I'm thinking he's trying to sell me a subscription. So I was like, well, I said, nah, I said, he said, here's my card, call me. It ended up being Bobby Shaw from MCA Records.
Oh, Bobby. Yeah.
And that's how I first met Bobby. And he was with Dave German and Leslie Doyle, who was with A&M at the time. And they were all there. And I think they were scouting different clubs. And, later on, Bobby was like, well, yeah, somebody gave us your name and the name of the club. And they said you were playing, a lot of, new music and some different stuff. And we were looking for that. So that's when I got my reportership. But it was a pain sometimes because you would get calls all hours of the day, night. It didn't matter what day it was. You would get a call and people were wanting to know how their song is doing. And hey, look, can you bump that up from 12 to 2?
Right.
It was interesting.
And
Oh,
that
so there.
generation of promoters that you're talking about, they were relentless. They were not. They were
Relentless.
not nice.
Wow. Really?
Mm-mm.
So what were they telling you, like when you should be playing the tracks?
Not really. They were more interested in chart position. So they
Oh,
were
okay.
jockeying their songs for position on the chart. A lot of times it was up to the DJ
Oh,
because
that
I
makes
got some
sense.
horrible songs. I got some horrible records. But what I would do, I would take maybe the instrumental or the bass line from a hit that's in the club and put the acapella on top of it just to give it a little bump up and get people on the floor and be able to say, well, yeah, I was able to play the record and this is what I thought. That happened a lot more times than I can count
So
on
you
one hand.
guys are the reason why Short Dick Man became popular.
That would be us.
Let me tell you a funny story about Short Dick Man.
Go ahead.
So before that record became, anything, the record labels would send out, like promo T-shirts. And there was a weekend that I was living in Austin at the time, and one of the record promoters came in from San Antonio, and he came to my club in Austin, and he and I drove back to Houston for something, I don't know what, and he was wearing a promo T-shirt. It said, "Don't want no short dick man." Okay, we stop at this gas station in the middle of the country, and you can't even imagine what kind of looks that guy was getting.
I can only imagine.
Now that that record's like a novelty, and a lot of people probably don't remember it, but that was just like
oh no, people still remember because I still hear it sometimes. And ironically enough, it was around the same time that Candy J came out with her Sweet Pussy Pauline record. And
yeah, that's the record I know you for.
that
is
was
the
crazy.
one.
You know what? I would say if you put both of those tracks side by side and ask me which one of these I would want to get rid of for the rest of my life, it's Short Dick Mac. I think that song is like, it's terrible. I hear people play it ironically, and it's kind of funny. Like if it's a serious club night, I'm like, what are you thinking, right? But like, if you want to play it, ironically. But Sweet Pussy Pauline, I mean, that shit will play. It's still kind of like a novelty, but it's a great tune.
That was comedy though.
Yeah, it was a great song. So what other tracks do you feel like you got pushed to? Well, actually, I didn't ask you, Jason. How did the Billboard reportership happen for you, and what was involved for you?
Well, I think I mentioned the last time we spoke. So Riddler, Rich Pangelina, and he was my college roommate, and he was one of the guys
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was one of the guys that I started DJing with in the '80s. So we came up together, and we've known each other a long time. He left Texas to New York in the early '90s. He was working for multiple record labels at the time, and then they were looking for another reporter, but instead of adding another reporter to Houston or Dallas, which already there were already several, Rich convinced Ricardo, who happened to be the charts manager, you need one in Austin, because that's when Austin was starting to make some noise and become a big city. So he put the word in for me, and that's how it started. That's how I got my foot in.
Nice. And so, what you guys were just submitting charts from 1 to 100?
It was, so basically the way it worked was you had several tiers. So you had like 5 that was your top 5. Mm-hmm. Then you had your heavies, which was that 5 also, Tony? I can't remember.
I thought it was 10.
It might have been. I don't know. It's been a while, but it was top 5. It was heavy. It was medium. It was light, and then it was recurrent. So all the records that that you're playing every week, but might be a little old, you would keep those in your recurrence, because those were records that were still hits and were records that still worked for you. So you were rotating these records, every week. And a lot of these records had really short shelf lives because you had so much product that was coming to you every week that you were having to, bump stuff down. And that's where it got a little confrontational sometimes with the promoters, because they were getting their money to get their records high up on the chart. And if you were knocking it down, then, it was ruining their chance of either getting a number 1 or having something that was called a bullet. And basically what a bullet was just a little notation next to the title when the magazine would come out to show that the record was still moving up. So if you lose a bullet, then everyone else on the panel kind of thinks, okay, well, this record's done. We're gonna knock it down because
it throws it into a tailspin.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But a lot of the promoters back then, they they would promise you things, of course, and that's why it was no problem to get an artist. If there was an artist that you wanted, as long as you supported that artist and their music, it was it was a shoe in. But there were some promoters that were a little heavy handed. I'll never forget Vince Pellegrino, bless his heart, Pellegrino Promotions. I'll never forget the day that he threatened to break my legs. And he had that really heavy Italian accent, and I was scared to look out the window,
And that
you
family
know,
was no joke either.
not at all.
Nope.
And but he was like, oh, I'm just joking, I'm just playing with you. But they were really nice about a lot of things. They would send you little notes, they would send you signed autographed pictures, they would send you autograph records and stuff, just to get you to support the artist or to move it along. And some promoters, they understood the game. They're like, look, I know you can only bring me in at 20, but can you hang in there with me for the next 6 weeks? And so you would want to help them out, you'd want to help the artist out. And a lot of times I would have music that's great, but if you don't have a number of reporters on that piece, it's really not going anywhere.
Right.
You really had to have the support of the other Billboard reporting DJs to really move a song.
Wow. What was this song? What was a kind of a standout song for you guys that you were pushing besides Short Dick Man? What was the other? Might be another song that you're like, hey, dang, I wish I wasn't pushing this song. Was there anything?
Bar-
Carrie McDowell. What was the name of that song? Her name was Carrie McDowell. She was on, I want to say, Atlantic, maybe Arista. And she was a sweet girl. She was sweet as she could be. It just wasn't a good song. I cannot think of the name of the track right now to save my life. But I actually I was reporting that song on my chart at number one, probably for about 3 weeks, because it was 2 months before Splash, and I needed a recording artist. And so, look, okay, look, I'll do this for you. Can you do that for me? Kind of a
Right.
thing. And it just was what it was. That's what was happening at the time. And but yeah, those are good old days.
What about you, Jason?
And plus, I mean, you would go like the seminar. Well, it was the new music seminar back then, which was in New York. They would, one promoter would pay for your hotel, another promoter would pay for your registration. The other promoters would take you out to breakfast, lunch, dinner, whatever, and make sure you didn't starve. So there were perks, that were in it, without a direct pay for play kind of a thing.
Right. What about you, Jason? Anything that pops out to you?
that was a record that I was hesitant and was questionable, or a good
Yeah, one
record.
that you were just like, "Ah, man, I really don't want to chart this. I don't want to be playing this. Anything that was,
Yeah, there was definitely a couple of things. One thing that comes to mind was I want to say around 2000. Do you remember when Sade had her comeback, the Leverage Rock tour?
oh yeah, for sure.
I wanted to go to that concert,
Uh huh.
and I asked for tickets, and yeah, yeah. So I kind of hoard myself out a little bit. So, but I got my tickets, and I went to the show, and you know, I'm not mad about it now.
No, I wouldn't be mad about it either.
Yeah.
I'm talking about a tune that was like, oh, this track is just garbage, but
Yeah,
I'm
I
pushing it.
think
There was so many.
yeah, there was a lot. So honestly, like for every 30 records that you got, like maybe one or two were great. I mean, you
Oh
have to
wow.
understand, like in the 90s, the amount of vinyl that was being sent out, it was a lot. And I mean, like now we don't think about it in those terms because everything that we're looking at now are audio files, right?
Right.
So you're you know as well as I do that when you shop for music, you're listening to literally hundreds of things before you can find 10 or 15 that you actually want to buy and put on your computer. But it was a lot more apparent then because vinyl was so big and it would take up so much space in your home that you would have, like, I would get those do you know those mail boxes that they would bring the mail in, those big plastic
Yeah,
things?
yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I would store all the garbage in.
Oh, man.
And I would take those out to the curb on, Tuesday or Wednesday or whenever recycling day was, because I just did not want all that mess in my apartment. And there was too many good records that you wanted to keep. Why do you want to have,
Yeah.
the
How about
Britney
There was a
Spears?
great one though. It was, I don't know if you remember, it's called Brass Monkey. Brass Monkey,
Oh, the
that
Beastie
funky
Boys.
junkie.
The
It
Beastie
was,
Boys. Oh,
Yeah.
I thought you were gonna. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, of course,
and
yeah.
and even though Beastie Boys were a great group,
Uh-huh.
it was something about that Brass Monkey. I was like, ugh.
You didn't like it.
I didn't want to chart it, but I was like,
Wow.
it's Beastie Boys. Come on.
Yeah. I was not a big fan of Beastie Boys as I got older, but I had a Beastie Boys license to ill tape that popped. I played it so
Yeah, buddy.
much.
I love them, but each their own.
Hey, how about this? How about a track that you passed on that ended up being a hit? Do you guys
Oof.
have any of those?
Maybe, yeah.
Anything that comes to
I
mind?
can tell you something completely unrelated though. That's kind of similar. But
Go ahead.
I went to Winter Music Conference probably in about 96, 97, and I went to probably 4 or 5 parties in 2 nights, and I kept hearing this record over and over and over again. And I guess I was just too prideful to ask what it was. But it was like a dub. So usually when you hear a dub, if you don't find out what it is, you're never gonna find out what it is. But it had this really cool like jazzy guitar in it, and I never found out what it was. But then about 3 years ago, I bought a a triple pack off of Discogs, and it was a brand new heavies triple pack.
Oh, wow.
And it was like, I kid you not, the dub on the B side of the third piece of vinyl. And I was like,
Wow.
what? I could not believe it. And I
That's
still
incredible.
play that record to this day, like all the time.
Yeah.
God, I mean, just it's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, because I
And
was
you can only play so much. You can only play so many pieces. So it's not exactly like you slept on it, but it's like between your request and between trying to pay attention to your chart and everything else. There were a few things that fell through the crack. I'm gonna tell you a song that I slept on. New Order, Blue Monday.
Oh man, classic. Classic.
I don't know what I was smoking at the time. I don't know what was happening, but I was someplace and somebody played it. And I was like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Yeah, on a big sound system, that record is magic.
Okay. And another DJ who was with me, he was like, oh, well, you wasn't feeling it the other day we were listening to it. I'm like, what are you talking about? He said it's somewhere in that stack of records over there you got. I was like, you're kidding. He said, no. He said, that's New Order, Blue Monday. And
Wow.
maybe and I think I want to say back then, was that Boy Bar? Was that Homage? It was one of the clubs, I think,
It was the same building.
yeah.
Yeah, they both were in
I
the
don't
same
remember
place.
what it was, but it sounded so good in that room.
Mhm.
But John Hanley was like that. Matter of fact, John Hanley was responsible for bringing a portion of the Paradise Garage sound system to Houston.
And that was in therapy, wasn't it?
That yet a portion of it was. He brought it
Yeah.
down here when he opened NRG over
Yep.
on
Okay.
Shepherd, all the way down to the JBL Bullet Tweeters.
It hurts. It hurt. Literally hurts your chest to stand in front of those subs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Energy was a big sound system.
Yeah.
So you guys mentioned Winter Music Conference. I'm going back this year. It hasn't. It has been a long time. But one of the biggest memories I have is I think it was like 2007, 2008, somewhere around there. It's the
Hey,
first
y'all
time
keep talking. I'm gonna jump out for a second. Hold on.
Okay.
Okay.
The first time I heard Marlon D's remix of Heaven, right, by Kem, and everybody played it. And I remember the first time I heard it, I was like blown away. And it just kept getting played and played. And that was the song of the conference.
Yeah.
It was a big memory for me because, like I think I went to one of the many pool parties and just dancing all night and hearing that song was just incredible. What can you say? Do you have any standout memories of Winter Music Conference now that it's kind of on its way
I
back?
think every year I've gone since 1988 has been a memory of some sort. But I think one of my best memories, it was probably one of my best nights there. And this was before Winter Music moved to Miami. It was in Fort Lauderdale. And there was this club called the China Club, and I played at the China Club. And there was another DJ from Philadelphia, Phil Dickerson. He was a Billboard reporter as well. Phil and I would always share a room together because we sort of liked the same music, and we would exchange stuff, and it would just be a blast. And one night it was me, Phil Dickerson, Jelly Bean Benitez, and who else was in that room with us? It was I don't think it was one of Jelly Bean's artists. I think it was one of the girls who were oh God, what's the name? God, I can't think of what her name was right now. But it was such an unrealistic night. Because of course, everybody knew who Jelly Bean was, but we had such a good time. He came in, he kicked his beautiful Italian loafers off, and we just had a great time. And it was just one of those things. And I think after we had finished, he horned in the room. We went down to the jacuzzi about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. It was real. It was a good night. But I have a lot of nights like that. I remember Puffy, Sean Combs,
Uh-huh.
Puff Daddy.
Uh-oh.
That
Here we
he
go.
was we
You were
were
at the after
walking down.
party?
It was at the
No, look, it was close, but no prize.
Okay.
boo.
We were going to Crowbar or somewhere, and we were on Washington, and we see these two Ducati bikes headed toward us. These like $80,000 bikes. It was two. It was him in the front, a girl was on the back, and another couple was behind them. He pulls over to the side of the road, and he was like, "Where is such and such and such and such a club?" And people were just walking by. It was, and me and Double Awake, we're standing there looking at each other like, "That's Puffy." So we told them where the club was. It was, "Thanks, you guys. See you later," and off they went.
No
It was
invite.
it was just, it's crazy, but that's how Miami had become.
Yeah.
Is that you would see anybody on the street.
Jason, we're talking about memorable moments in Winter Music Conference history for you. What is a standout moment? I know that every year I went, it was like Tony was saying, just there was always something about one year after another. Something interesting. You have any good memories of Winter Music
Yeah.
Conference?
So my first year was probably about 92, 93, and that's when it used to be at it was the Fontainebleau Marriott, and it was very small. It was just, record industry people. So, a couple of thousand people, no big deal. But then eventually, like, you would have all the European tourists that were at the hotel, and then they didn't want the convention in there anymore, and they pushed it out. So then it just became like this big mammoth thing as we know it now. So I think my big standout was like the year or maybe 2 years after it got moved from the Fontainebleau. They used to do they would do a couple of parties. One was called the Magic Sessions,
Oh,
and it was
huge.
Yeah.
always Louis and Tony Humphreys, and then they would always have another. And sometimes it was Ted Patterson, and it was produced by Leslie Doyle. So she
Mhm.
was, she was really good friends with Ted, so he was always, the third DJ. So that was really really a big thing for me. And then another thing was Masters at Work used to throw this day party, and it was at this place called Opium Gardens, and it was a really big, like, outdoor, like, very, almost like you're in like Herman Park, And the first time I went to that, it was so cool because Kenny and Louie of course played, but they also had Jazzy Jeff, and that was their guest, and that was really an eye opener for a lot of the people that were, Masters at Work fans because, you were either, an East Coast person or you were from Europe, and that was kind of their nucleus, their fan base. So when they brought Jazzy Jeff to play with them, like it kind of, opened a lot of people's eyes because yeah, of course he played hip hop, and that's what most people know him as that don't really know anything about him. But he was also playing, you know, jazz oriented stuff. He was playing, R&B, and he has such a great history. He goes back so many years that just his range of music is just it's unmatched in my opinion. And yeah, that was just God, it was just so cool to see him with Kenny and Louie because those guys are just, they're on another plane as far as I'm concerned. So that was a big one, and then also a couple of times that I actually saw Roger Sanchez play. That was really really awesome too because I knew him from his records, from stuff that he put out. Like back then, I think it was like Narcotic Records. That was his first label. I never really got to see him in New York back in the day because he was actually overseas quite a bit by the time I started visiting New York. And then, of course, like there was the Death Mix party,
Right.
which they always had on Thursday night, which was really, really cool because, everybody was doing all the stuff on the weekend and then, they would get in on Thursday. So it would be Morales, Frankie Knuckles, who else? Like
Satoshi Tomi
maybe him. Yeah. No, well, he was kind of doing more techno stuff, I think.
by then. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. It was like Saw
I know
Records.
he was a Def Mix guy. I know
Yeah,
that.
he was their keyboard player before he ever lived here. He was still in Japan, and
Yeah.
they brought him over, and so that Death Mix party was really a big deal to me also because that kind of opened my mind to a lot of music that I just wasn't playing yet.
Yeah.
But just hearing them play, it was just like,
It's Frankie
man,
Knuckles as well, right? Frankie Knuckles was a
yeah,
Def Mix
Yeah.
guy.
yeah,
Yeah.
they were
And sometimes the parties, it wasn't something that happened while you were there, but maybe after. Because I remember the last year Frankie Knuckles played Winter Music Conference before he passed. It was him, David Morales, and a diva.
Oh
hmm
wow, yeah.
No, Ultranate. At the what's that? The not the Clevelander. One of those little hotel pool parties. And it didn't mean anything to me until after he passed. And I was like, wow, we just saw him a few months ago, you know.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, sometimes it's when you get back from winter music that you remember stuff. And
Yeah.
plus we would chase down records like you were saying, whatever the record was for that winter music, we're looking for the elusive, test pressing of that. And I would have music shipped back to Houston. That's how much music I would get, and little
Wow.
trinkets and this and bags and baubles and beads. And I would just have it all shipped back to Houston.
Wow.
Oh, and another thing I forgot to mention was Danny Tenaglia. He used to play at this little place that was called Groove Jet. And he would do these marathons. They were like 15, 16 hours. And yeah, that was like a big, big thing back then. And it was hard to get into because, that room was small. It only held like maybe 300 people.
I remember people talking about Danny Tenellia's his sets. They were so long that they would just be like, "Yeah, I think Danny gets into this one mood early, so we're probably not going to go till probably about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning." I'm like, "What? This guy's playing all night." I mean, you give me 4 hours behind the decks, and I'm like, my shuffling around like my feet are hurting.
Yeah, man, he would start at 10 and you wouldn't hear any vocals until like 4 in the morning.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. I still
Yeah.
haven't had a chance to listen to the Danny Tenellia mix, and I've always wanted to go. Like I rented a apartment near Cielo at one point in time, and he was playing there, and I just never really got a chance to get out there. But especially in New York, I mean, if you follow him on social media, you could see he's got an incredible, just in his own basement, just an incredible setup down there.
That's a big house, man.
Yeah, jeez, man.
Well, he's into building stacks now, which
Yeah.
I think is great. I think is great. But yeah, I think not just the music, but the craft of how the music is delivered through the speakers. I think that's probably half of it as well. And now, he's, really bringing back the old fashioned stacks like from back in the day. And I really wanted to hear some of his stuff in these stacks. I haven't had the opportunity yet, but it's some great people out there that are actually doing great things when it comes to sound. Do you remember David Lee from Houston?
Yeah,
David
of
Lee,
course. Yeah.
tall,
Bass
Yeah.
boss.
yeah, bass boss, incredible. He taught me how to build speaker cabinets.
Was it
His first company was Bass Max.
Bass
Now
boss,
it's
Bass
it was
Max.
Bass Max at first,
right?
and now it's Bass Boss.
bass boss, right?
Yeah. So he started out with Bass Max. Brilliant sound system, great. The
Yeah,
guy's just got a mind for.
yeah,
I mean, you could tell. Like I had met him a few times. Went over to his warehouse. He's just got this mind for the mechanics, the engineering of making beautiful sound systems.
yeah.
I saw him the other day. Guy hasn't aged. He's like a freaking vampire, this guy. But I saw him the other day advertising his Bass Boss speakers. I guess he took them to SEMA, but or not SEMA. What's it called? NAM.
Now,
Yeah, I'm getting my scenes mixed up.
Is he
But
in Austin now?
I'm not sure where he is.
it's in
But
California.
is he in
Okay.
California?
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, I
he's
mean,
got
this,
a system and I think he's got several systems in Austin.
really.
Yeah. Louis Vega played one of those clubs. Was it year before last? The Engine Room. I think that's what it's called, the Engine Room.
Oh
No,
yeah,
not the
that's
engine
that.
room. It's
Well, the
called
Engine
something
Room
else.
that was like a live music venue. I didn't even
Yeah,
know
that
that
was
was
that
still around.
engine rooms in
Yeah,
Houston.
it's not a big club, it's rather small, but they have baseball speakers in it,
Mm.
which made the room just delicious.
You know what I really miss? I was just thinking about this, like, because you guys were talking about how connected the nightclub scene was back in those days with Houston scene, and um, I remember like I became a scenester well before I even became a DJ. And it's one of the
Mhm.
reasons why I mean the first thing I did for house music was I was a promoter. I didn't even I hadn't even DJ'd yet. I promoted a night for Mr. Bristle and Vic Vegas, and our
Mhm.
first guests were DJ Baby C and Sincere. And I remember being able to just go from club to club, and everybody knew everybody who was like either a promoter or just like part of the scene. You never had to worry about waiting in a line. I just walked up, and it wasn't like I was somebody like was going to spend thousands of dollars at the. They just knew we just knew who each other was because it was an
Mhm.
industry
Mhm.
thing. I mean, maybe it's because I've just been so detached lately, and I live in Atlanta, but I don't see that kind of like connection anymore in the nightclub scene in Houston. What do you
Well,
guys
that's
think?
because connections aren't what they used to be. It used to be one-on-one connections.
Yeah.
Now it's your page or your website or your TikTok or your, whatever. So we're not connected like we used to be anymore. And I mean, I miss the old days where it was actual record reps in your city,
Yeah.
you know. Those days are gone. The industry is not what it once was, and I don't think it'll ever be again,
Mhm.
quite honestly.
What are your thoughts, Jason?
It's it's weird because I know what you mean about the way it once was when everybody kind of knew each other. Because if you remember, back then downtown was nothing but liquor stores, bail bonds, and adult bookstores,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
there were a few nightclubs, but to go down there, that was kind of like an adventure, and your average person would not do that. So then when they started, building up and gentrifying and putting, all these businesses in, then it felt a little bit safer, and then you start getting people driving in from Katy and Friendswood
Yeah.
and all the burbs
Yeah.
and then you have this new population of people that are going out like in the bars and the clubs, and then all of the people that you may once have known that lived in the city, they kind of got lost in the shuffle because now you got all these people that are from God knows where, and you have no idea who they are, and you may never see them again because they may just be in for a bachelorette party, and and then they're back to Pearland the next week. And so like that community that you're speaking of, just I don't think really exists anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gone.
I remember you would go to one club, and then Prashant would show up, or Mike from the bouncer Mike would show up at some
Hmm.
randomly, and you would just see these people like that you just knew from the whole scene, maybe
Hmm.
converging at the after hours club, and it was more like an industry kind of like group of people. It was kind of clicky, but it was like
Yeah,
the family. It was always like Byron was always making his way into a club when he
holding
was playing.
court. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Like it was a cool connection that I felt like we
Yeah,
started to lose it after a while. Like
you're right.
yeah.
You're right.
I mean, I try to, like, I always think, well, maybe it's just I'm older and I'm not really in the clubs like that anymore. There's no more Monday.
It's
And
not that.
remember Monday was
Yeah.
an industry night. That's when like
Hmm.
people would
That was,
show up,
that was their
and
night off.
you
Yeah.
saw everybody there.
Hmm.
It's just
Yeah.
not like that anymore.
No, it's not.
No. I miss all the people like Scooby Doo crew
Oh
and
yeah,
and
shout out Kelly.
those, because to me they were really artists,
Yeah.
at what they did. I'll never forget the time that we took the hangar. You remember the
Hmm.
hangar?
Oh yeah.
warehouse that was, yeah, over there by the old Incognito. And we were there all night long on scaffolding and hanging up scrim and lasers and it was I was dead tired. I was literally like the Walking Dead. But I was having the time of my life. I was learning a lot, you know. And it was just a great time. It was more camaraderie, and it's like that's gone now because all we have now are the clubs. Those are the places. You don't have the Scooby Doo crews anymore.
Yeah.
Those days are really kind of gone. You
Yeah.
know.
It's
I
it's
remember.
tough too because go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
I just remember those old pioneers of like you're talking about like the pioneers of the underground electronic music scene,
Yeah.
the beginnings of the people who they were no longer interested in mainstream music. They wanted to hear something that was like, so yeah, that part was interesting to me, and it was really difficult for me to get into because I was so used to the like polished and pretty nightclub scene,
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm sorry,
Yeah, that
Jason, what
was
were you saying?
kind of more of a rave scene, but
Yeah,
awesome just the same.
definitely. Jason, you guys had, I mean, you had Coy West and 626 crew out there in Austin. You had a bunch of the underground
Hmm.
music guys out there. I think you probably even worked with those guys at Kingdom.
No, I was long gone by the time Kingdom opened. I came
Okay.
back to Houston in 2004,
Oh, okay.
so
Yeah.
yeah, that was like a few years later.
Right.
But yeah, I do know all of those guys, and the ones that I don't know, I'm aware of. I cross paths with them at some time.
Yeah. The Chris
Hmm.
Specht, Coy
Yeah,
West.
Chris and Jackie, his sister.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there was uh, the girls that were the jungle DJs. The who was it? Rollers Redefined. Do you remember them?
I don't. It just wasn't my part of the scene, but
Yeah.
I know their names for sure.
Yeah, it was Kathy Russell. Actually, that's when I met Sean. What's Sean's last name? You know Sean, drum and bass
Sean
guy.
Vishnu.
Her and
Uh,
Lion.
yeah,
Yes. Uh-huh.
yeah. Sean. He
So
goes by
I
the
I
Lord
never
Vishnu.
knew him. Yeah, I never knew him when I was in Houston, but when I was in Austin, he moved there and he was working at Aliens, so that's when I first met him.
Right.
So he kind of, you know, I was interested in drum and bass. I never really played it. I like to listen to it. So I would always ask him for like, titles and recommendations because I didn't really know too much about it on my own. So he would always, give me a few things. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Sean's a great guy. Shout out Sean Jimenez. Sean J.
Sean Jimenez, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's his brother's name?
Ruben.
Ruben. He's
Baby
the hip
Roo.
hop guy, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Baby Roo.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow. You're making me work into this some of the back parts of my brain, man. That's some old school shout outs there.
Yeah, I used to skate with him a long time ago too. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Were you like one of those Easy 7 guys going out there to the
I skated in two contests at Easy Seven and 85 and probably 86. I was
Oh, man,
really
so
little.
then you know Jeff Messina.
I don't know. I don't know. I
Really?
might. Yeah.
Yeah. He was a big hip hop produced promoter in the
Uh-huh.
city. Him and Craig BBC Long
I know
used to
Craig.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
they used to promote hip hop events a lot. He eventually purchased a Warehouse Live is his venue, or it was his
Okay.
venue.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Um, Big jiu-jitsu guy. Those lines kind of crossed for me when I went into the MMA world for a while.
Okay.
But yeah, I want to thank you guys for taking your time to talk with me. I think we're pretty much wrapped. We're about an hour and a half in. I've still got to edit this stuff. So, and any final thoughts for you guys? Any final shout outs?
Well, my birthday's on the 24th, so this will probably be the beginning of my birthday week.
Beep, 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 beep. Yeah.
Are you turning
So
30?
so so if
30,
you see
30
any
years old.
strange people in the room, they're probably there for me.
All right. I just want to say I'm excited to play with Tony because Tony was there at my almost at my beginning, and I kind of feel like this is getting towards my end a little bit now. So
Ah,
Tony, my man, I'm really really excited to play with you,
Oh, it's gonna be a blast.
and you know I've always thought the world of you. So yeah, this is
Likewise.
yeah.
Even though you're a little kid.
he
No,
still
That
looks.
that
yeah.
was
Look
the
at that
kid.
face. He looks 13.
Okay. I'm jealous.
Man, that's good, man. I'm glad y'all throwing some flowers too. I appreciate that. That's always good to see and hear. Yeah, two legends. I wish I could be there, but we're looking forward to having you guys. And thank you very much for meeting with me. And we'll talk to you soon.
It's been our pleasure.